Hello and welcome back to another episode of Notion Bonsai. And in this video today, I'm going to be working on juniper. But more specifically, I'm going to be talking about how to work on juniper in autumn and when not to work on juniper in autumn, and just go over some pruning ideas that you can apply to your bonsai just to take them that little step further into becoming a great tree. So here I have got a few different types of juniper species that we're going to be working on in this video today, and as of right now for me it is autumn, or some people like to call it fall. Now when it comes to juniper bonsai or junipers in general, just like the majority of outdoor trees, they do go dormant in winter. Junipers are in the category of evergreen trees, meaning they don't lose their foliage during the dormant season, almost like they're just going on pause for a little bit of time before spring comes along again and they get a burst of energy. All the energy moves up the tree and they begin growing again. Because they keep their foliage throughout the winter, during the times of the day there is sunlight, junipers actually do continue to photosynthesize. They continue to bring energy down the tree into the roots. However, if you happen to be in an area in the world where it drops below -5 with your trees outdoors, around these temperatures the root ball of your actual trees can freeze, and when this happens the water that's being taken up by the roots can no longer be brought up as efficiently, so you may get some browning on the ends of your juniper. It can go sort of an orange, dark brownish color. This is known as photoinhibition, and when this happens, your junipers aren't really able to photosynthesize as efficiently. So if you get some browning, I wouldn't advise pruning your tree. But now in autumn, just as the trees are slowing down, I like to give my junipers a prune. We can balance the vigor of the tree, get the branches in all the right places, so whenever it does push out new extensions in spring, all the branches are in the right place, and we can drastically improve the design and look and style of a bonsai in a much shorter time frame. The tools that we'll be using in this video today are some twig cutters, wire cutters, branch cutters, bonsai tweezers, and some gin pliers. And as always, if you're new to bonsai and you're just getting started, you don't need all of these specialized bonsai tools. Of course, they do make the job a lot easier, but you can get by with just an ordinary pair of garden secateurs or some garden scissors, just whatever you have at your disposal to get a particular job done. Although you do want to make sure that whatever scissors that you are using are clean and sharp. Clean so we don't introduce any bacterial or fungal infections to our trees. Definitely sterilize your tools between trees, and you want them sharp because a sharp pair of scissors will give you a much cleaner cut. And in horticulture, nice clean cuts heal so much faster and more efficiently than a blunt cut that was squashed by a dull blade. So starting off with this little juniper, this brings me on to my first point. You only really want to work on a tree if the tree is healthy, and as you can see with this one, it is a little on the weak side. It doesn't really have that much foliage to work with or even prune. So just because you have a juniper in your bonsai collection doesn't mean you have to prune it in autumn. I would say only prune it if it needs it and if the tree is healthy enough to take it. So with this one here, it doesn't need pruned. It's a little bit weak, doesn't have much foliage, so I'm just going to put this back on my bench and maybe do nothing to it for the next 2 or 3 years, just until it grows a little bit more. And the same goes for this other juniper I have. This is an Itoigawa. This tree was recently wired in around midsummer, and just checking the wire on this tree by unwinding it a little, I can check whether or not the wire is beginning to hold the tree in place, and currently it is not. So for this reason, I'm going to keep all the wire on the tree over winter, and then when spring comes around again and this tree begins pushing out new branches, it'll begin thickening. So then you really want to keep an eye on the wire to make sure it's not biting in too much to the trunk. But for now, I think all I can do is just clean up the surface of the soil. So as you can see here, there's a weed just growing in the side of the pot. Taking this off, and this is all the sphagnum that I put on top of this when I repotted it. Now it is time just to remove that. And that's all I'm going to do with this tree for now. And now moving on to this tree, this is an Itoigawa juniper that I have been working on my channel for quite some time now. It's really coming into the refinement stages. The structure of the tree has been set in place, and we just want to keep refining it year after year. And with this one, this is a really good example of why you would prune in autumn. As you can see, this tree is really healthy. It's got long extensions all over it. There's got extensions here, all over this side, down over here. And if your juniper has extensions like this is a really good sign that it is in what is known as energy positive mode, where the tree's got lots of energy. It's okay to prune it. And what I want to do with this tree today is simply balance the energy across the tree. So I want more or less the same foliage density in the bottom of the tree as it is at the top of the tree. And with junipers, just like most trees, they are what is known as apically dominant, meaning they put most of their energy into the top of the tree because simply this is where the tree is getting the most light. So just as this tree now is going dormant, I'm going to prune more heavily on the top than I am the bottom. And even over winter, as this tree continues to get light, the tree is going to put a little bit more energy into the bottom branches, and the health of the tree will be nice and balanced all over. Now, just looking at this bottom pad of this tree, just so we can isolate it and see it better, I'm taking a black plastic bag and just putting it under like this. And as you can see already, when we pruned the ends of this branch, even right over here when we pruned it there, we did this to encourage back budding. And as you can see already, this tree has began to put back buds just further in. This is new growth from this season, which is an extremely good sign. We're pushing the growth back in the tree, trying to get a nice dense pad in this area. So just here, as these extensions are getting a little long, I'm just going to cut these right here. There's another little extension here. And whenever you cut junipers, you don't want to go and cut right through all the foliage like this, because this will leave the ends brown and it really doesn't look nice. Instead, what you want to do is come in with the scissors and cut it at the stem. Again, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to prune this back. Here, I could even take this part in a little more. And then finally, this part over here, I'm simply going to shorten it into here. And as you can see now, we've just balanced the pad. It's beginning to look a little bit more like a little clump on the tree. Looking at the same pad from the front angle, as you can see, there is some downward growth that I just want to get rid of. So I'm going to cut this here. That way the pads look nice and flat. And any growth that's on the underside anyway, because the top is going to get so dense, the growth on the underside isn't going to get any light. So eventually it will turn brown and just fall off on its own. And then in this same fashion, I'm going to thin out the rest of the pads on the bottom of the tree, taking away any growth that is going straight up like this branch and anything that is going straight down. It's also worth noting that if you have a tree and it is completely healthy, it's ready to prune in autumn, it looks good, you want to develop the pads, but the tree isn't quite as thick as you want the trunk to be yet, by pruning the tree in autumn, it will drastically slow down how quickly the trunk of your tree will thicken. Alternatively, what I recommend, if you want to thicken the trunk of your tree, leave it alone, get it into a bigger pot in spring, or even plant it directly into the ground, and this will really speed up how quickly your tree thickens. So there are some times in autumn where you wouldn't prune like that. Always ask yourself in bonsai, why am I doing whatever I'm doing at the moment? Because if you can figure out the why in bonsai, why things are happening, why you're doing certain things at certain times of the year, you've more or less solved half of your problems. This part coming up to the apex of the tree is quite dense, so I really want to thin this out. I'm going to start by just taking off the downward growing branches, just lifting this pad up to see what's going on under it. I'm just going to begin removing some branches, and if I lift this up, as you can see, we can cut this here like that. That's a little piece that we've thinned out. We can do the same with some branches in here, and by repetitively doing this, you can get this more and more thin. This is a branch that's growing straight up, so I can get rid of that. This is a branch way back in there I don't want. And now we've just reinstated that pad. I'm really happy with how that's looking. Moving up on the tree, doing the same thing. We're more or less repeating this process over the whole tree, but again, just a little bit more harshly on the top. You don't want to take off every single growing tip, because if you do this, it could stress a juniper too much. Again, I'm just going to demonstrate one more time. To thin out this branch, there's a growing tip here. I'm going to go in, cut that right here, and we thin this out. Now when it comes to the very top apex of the tree, this part here, this is a part that I have kept and allowed to grow as leader of the tree. That way we get a more nice natural taper, and eventually when this gets nice and thick, I can cut it back to another branch. That will become the leader, and I'll just continue this process till eventually I decide I want an apex to stop here, or maybe even up here. So that is why coming in and pruning this off right now isn't such a good idea for how I want to develop this tree, but I do want this to continue getting longer. And if I keep all the foliage the whole way along this branch, all this is going to want to grow out into many branches when spring comes. So even on this tall whip, I'm going to thin out the branches, only keep some side shoots that could be future branches of the tree. So as you can see, we didn't do anything too crazy, just a light maintenance prune. And to me now, the energy is balanced throughout the tree. Everything is at the same, roughly the same denseness all over. And I think this tree should do pretty well next spring. If you would like to keep up to date with this tree off YouTube, check out my Instagram. It is at Notion Bonsai. And if you want to see the progression of this tree, of how it got to where it is today, just from a piece of pre-bonsai material, I will leave the link to the playlist of this tree in the description of this video. The best time to propagate and take cuttings from junipers I have found is midsummer, and especially if you're using a fertilizer from the start of spring to midsummer with a good amount of phosphorus in it. The tree will have lots of natural auxins to be able to produce roots, and although autumn isn't the ideal to take cuttings, Itagawa are quite expensive, so why not try anyways. Rooting gel works a lot better than rooting powder for junipers and evergreens and even pines if you're taking candle cuttings from pines. This particular rooting gel is available on my store notionbonsai.com if you're interested. So how it works is we just open the cap, take a little branch like this. I found with junipers you want a little piece of the stem to have been lignified, so as you can see here at the bottom, if it is lignified it will have a brown area like this where it has began to go woody. If you take cuttings and they're fleshy like this green part up here, I have found they're not as successful. So I'm just removing the lower pieces of foliage, dipping this into the hormone rooting gel. As you can see, the gel has attached itself to the base of the cutting. So now whenever we take this and put it into our substrate to root it and we water the cutting, the gel isn't going to be washed away as easily. I would just like to say that whatever rooting powder or gel that you are using, doesn't have to be this one, it can be any one, but I would just highly recommend that you get the one that has the active ingredient IBA, also known as indole 3 butyric acid, because this is the hormone, the synthetic version of the hormone auxin that makes the cuttings roots so much faster and you'll have a higher success rate. I have also found that if you're doing Itagawa cuttings, to put them relatively close together in the pot just until they have rooted, because when the cuttings are nice and close together like this, and if you have these in a greenhouse, because these are still transpiring, having them close together does indeed help with keeping the humidity levels up. If you wish to also, you can take these pots, put them inside a plastic bag, and that will act like a mini greenhouse for the cuttings. Now moving on to this little juniper. This is a Blue Star Juniper. It's got this spiky foliage. I am seeing some extensions on it, new growth, even beginning to produce little fruits back here that will become juniper berries. Now just so that the tree isn't putting excess energy into these little berries, I'm just going to pluck them out. That way it puts more of its energy into the foliage that we want it to. And with this one again, I'm just going to give it a little maintenance prune, pruning it back so it isn't getting too long. I really want to define the pads of the tree. And this is somewhat of an unconventional bonsai. Got a really strange twisty nature to the trunk of it. But no matter the shape of your bonsai, you can still apply these techniques. Because we're removing foliage off the top of the tree, it's going to have less transpiration sites on the top. Therefore, the trees aren't going to need as much water. So if you get a lot of rain in winter and the pots get a little bit flooded, just be wary of how much water your trees get. That's all I'm going to do with this tree for today. I may come back in spring and reshape this tree because it's beginning to look a little bit strange. Not really like a bonsai, so I might give it more a drastic twist. Try and make the height of this tree smaller next year. Or I may even air layer this tree here because this section of the trunk is quite straight. I'm just going to leave this one and think about it. And finally, we've got this little Blue Star Juniper. This is one that is being developed by my brother. He wants me to prune this one for him. So it is on the energy positive side. It's got lots of nice foliage that's new, beginning to get a little bit leggy in the sense that all these old needles are dying off on the inside, which is completely normal. He wants to keep this as a little small tree in this pot. So I'm just going to come in, take some of the ends off, push the growth back, so when spring comes next year, it'll grow nice and dense. Removing a lot of congestion on trees like this also means that a lot more air is going to be able to get through the junipers. There's less of a chance for your junipers to develop any fungal or insect problems. Because if the foliage is nice and close together, moisture can build up in them areas and insects can find their way between the foliage. Spiders can bury egg sacs sometimes in the foliage, but if it's nice and aired out, I find this is just less likely to happen. I'm sort of feeling that this branch is a little bit too thick for the design of the tree. My brother doesn't mind too much what I do to this tree, and I think it would look a lot more proportional if this wasn't here. This would be known as a competing trunk line, as it is beginning to thicken quite a bit now. So I'm going to cut this off just here. We could make this a Deadwood feature if we wanted to, and I think that might actually make quite a nice Deadwood feature. I'm going to take these scissors, create a stop point. Then I'm just going to take these gin pliers and crush the branch. This is for just that, creating what is known as a gin. So we just crush the branch the whole way down, and that should peel off really easily. I think if I made this just a little smaller, it would be a little bit more proportional. So I'm going to cut that like halfway down, maybe here. Then we can just break it off. I've just found that tearing wood like this gives you a more natural appearance than cutting it, because the fibers of the wood tear in a really natural way. I'm going to stop that right there. It's best to wait about a year before applying some lime sulfur to it. That way the piece of deadwood can accumulate real age, and then a year after we can come in and preserve it with some lime sulfur, whiten it, and it will look even better. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like down below. It really helps out the channel a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And please let me know what you thought of this video down in the comments below. Perhaps there is something you would have done differently with some of these junipers. I'm always open to new and different ideas in bonsai. If you would like to support me and the things that I do on this channel, hit the thanks button down below. Or if you'd like to become a channel member, hit the join button. That way you'll get early access to new videos before they go out to everyone else. And you will get access to membership posts. But on that, thank you so very much for watching.